Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Counted! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies traded up and drafted Cedric Coward in the first round of Wednesday's NBA draft. They also made a couple of selections in the second round. So on today's episode, I'm going to go over the NBA draft and how it affects the Grizzlies. I've been on vacation for a week, so now I think I'm all caught up, and now I'm ready to talk about the Grizzlies' activities, their drafting of Cedric Coward. So let's get right into it. The Grizzlies traded up from 16 to 11 to get the player they wanted, the player they had identified. I think a lot of people, when they were doing mock drafts and they were looking at where the Grizzlies were, figured perhaps the Grizzlies were just a tier down from maybe where they wanted to be to get the talent they wanted in the first round. So it made sense for them possibly, if the opportunity presented itself, to trade up. Also, I think we, as Grizzlies fans, monitoring their salary cap situation and their desire to get a contract done with Jaren Jackson Jr., we've been looking at this draft as a opportunity to trade away a salary you might need to trade away. So frankly, I was expecting a trade down and maybe moving on from salary being the most likely outcome. The other outcome was either they stayed at 16 or they did what they did, which is move up and get Cedric Coward. And this Cedric Coward guy is a very exciting prospect. And also, of course, as all of you listeners know, the regular listeners know, I'm not a scout. I don't watch college basketball. If you're a college basketball fan, if you're an NBA draft fan, you know more than me about the player. I'm just going to assess this based on the things that I'm reading, and also I think for most of my analysis of the pick, it's just based on the slot where he got drafted. I'm thinking about him as an 11th pick. And I'm also going to, of course, talk about the trade to acquire him. And I'm looking at that just as the value cost to get this guy. But everything we're reading about Cedric Coward, especially when we come at it with the slant of being Grizzlies fans, is the tantalizing upside and the fact that this guy was shooting up draft boards. This guy had an unbelievable combine. All of his measurables were very good. This is the type of player whose stock increased when the basketball stopped, which I guess if you want to be a skeptic about that, you can. But this is a player whose college numbers were absurd when it comes to his shooting percentages. This is one of those guys where you have the super smart people who cover the draft nerds, the folks from NBA Twitter, many of whom now work in successful front offices in the NBA, including the Grizzlies front office. They use these specific models to understand that, hey, certain stats translate pretty well in the NBA usually. And you look at a guy like Coward and his effective field goal percentage, those numbers are especially bonkers. He shot 72% on two-pointers in his 3 years in the NCAA, also 39% on three-pointers. So those are eye-popping numbers. Then you combine that with his great free throw shooting numbers, and then he goes to the combine, does excellent in all the shooting drills, and also measures with this preposterous wingspan. Everybody getting so excited about his 7'2" wingspan. This is on a 6'6" guy. So because of that, he's a player many people had targeted as being a sleeper, of being a guy that smart teams are going to target. You had David Thorpe from True Hoop saying he should go second behind Cooper Flagg. So this is the guy that I think can excite you as a Grizzlies fan for being a 3-and-D guy, hopefully on day one, also being athletic enough with that wingspan, eventually can become a plus defender. Like his steal and block numbers were pretty solid. So that's the reason you see the Grizzlies trade up to get Coward, the prototypical 3-and-D guy, hopefully can guard multiple positions and, of course, can space the floor for Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Zach Edey. I mean, if you want to think about player comps, is he Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? Newest Grizzly Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with much greater wingspan. I saw one, somebody dropped it in the Patreon Slack channel over at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. One draft expert called him Vince Williams Jr. A Vince Williams Jr. who can shoot with more consistency. That's pretty good. So this is a promising defensive-minded shooter, as best I understand it, even if the defense still needs a little bit of a ways to go with that wingspan and with the way he measured. Very, very exciting pick. Now, importantly, I think when we assess this draft pick, of course, if he turns out to be great, you say it's an absolute home run. But there is the further context that I think we need to appreciate, which is the acquisition cost, what it took for the Grizzlies to trade up and get their guy at 11. And again, you understand why they did this. Coward probably would not have been there at 16. Drafting at 16, the Grizzlies were right behind the Spurs and Thunder, teams you probably don't want to be right behind when drafting, so they were aggressive. They made this deal with the Trailblazers, and they sent 2 future second-round picks and that 2028 Orlando unprotected first to go from 16 to 11. If you want to divorce yourself from thinking about Cedric Coward, just look at it on paper in a vacuum. Moving up from 16 to 11 or using an unprotected first, even if it is from a presumed maybe good team in a few seasons, that's a lot. That is a hefty price. That is an expensive deal. Whether or not it was the right decision, of course, we won't know for many, many years, but it does continue the pattern of Zach Kleiman trading up in drafts. Frequently, this is a thing he does. It also is another time where the Grizzlies have used one of those valuable future picks to move up in the draft. Same thing happened with Jake LaRavia. I'm going to get a little bit more into all of the Zach Kleiman trade-ups in a second, but this was a premium price paid by the Grizzlies to move up. And perhaps that was something they knew they were going to do when they made the Desmond Bane deal. I think it's also helpful maybe to look at this draft day trade to move up and combine it with the Desmond Bane deal, because they moved 2 of those 4 first-round picks that they got. They used 2 of them to get Cedric Coward. Now, if you want to look at it, overall, you could say the Desmond Bane deal was Desmond Bane and 2 second-round picks for the draft rights for Coward, for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Cole Anthony, and then that 2026 Orlando Phoenix swap that's very valuable, and the 2030 unprotected first-round pick from the Magic, and also the 2029 top 2 protected first-round pick swap from the Magic. Like, does that change your opinion of the Desmond Bane trade at all? If you trade Bane plus a couple of seconds, and again, I don't care that much about second-round picks. I mean, at times, you don't want to waste second-round picks, but they're somewhat fungible. You can acquire more second-round picks. So, like, if you think of a second-round pick as something you can just get and it doesn't mean that much to you, great. I don't have a big argument against that. But Desmond Bane and a couple of second-round picks for, let's say, 2 first-round picks, the rights to Cedric Coward, and then KCP and Cole Anthony. That's the overall transaction. Now, as excited as we can be about Coward, there are some maybe question marks about him. He's a little bit older. He's going to turn 22 in September. He only played 6 games last year. If you're like me and don't know much about these draft prospects, that's probably a bullet point that could have gone higher up in this show. He has a significant, or he's recovering from a significant shoulder injury. He tore his labrum. He is not currently cleared for contact. sounds like there's a very good chance he won't play in Summer League. So we have all of summer possibly to keep dreaming about what he could be. This is a guy who, again, his draft stock went up when the basketball ended. He played 6 games last year at Washington State. Second straight year, the Grizzlies taking a guy from Washington State and hoping he steps right into the rotation, following in the footsteps, of course, of Jalen Wells. But this is a guy a little bit older, only played 6 games last year, has those injury concerns. So you think, is this worth all that stuff? Is this worth those 2 first-round picks? That 16th pick that you got from the Magic in this year's draft in the Bane trade, and then that 2028 unprotected pick. My takeaway, I would say, of course, I'm agnostic about the pick as far as Coward being a basketball player or a prospect. I probably tend to be optimistic about it, probably like many of you are. I'm like, sounds good. Sounds like a good decision. My question would be the price as far as not putting any protections in on that 2028 first rounder. It seems like the Trailblazers might have accepted this trade if you're like, listen, that 2028 first from Orlando, let's say top 6 protected. What's the holdup there? Like, I don't know if that was a deal breaker, but it does feel like a lot to give up an unprotected pick, even if we think the Magic are going to be good with Desmond Bane. We're talking about the 2028 draft. We don't know what's going to happen. Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero both tore oblique muscles last year. Who knows if they're going to have injury issues. Suggs, of course, has injury issues. Desmond Bane, sort of known for missing games. So I don't love giving away an unprotected future first-round pick for a draft prospect. Also, this goes back to the Grizzlies using their draft assets not on proven NBA players, using them on rookies. And winning with rookies is hard. I mean, you commend the Grizzlies on winning 48 games last year in the regular season while starting Zach Edey for a lot of it and for starting Jalen Wells most of it. But getting the Grizzlies where they want to go, which Zach Kleiman has reemphasized, is a championship. You know, they are not closer than they've been in a while. They're actually, I think, further than they've been in a while. I think the on-paper fit, you can dream about it. You can dream about having these 3 and D wings, Jalen Wells, plus Cedric Coward, plus Kentavious Caldwell-Pope if he sticks around, plus Vince Williams Jr. if he bounces back from last year. Those guys filling in the gaps between Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. and also Zach Edey, that sounds pretty exciting. Maybe a clear-cut hierarchy of Ja and Jaren being your big scorers. Maybe Edey can take a step forward offensively next year. We're all hoping for that and expecting that. He should get better there. But also, is that better than the team you had with Desmond Bane? I don't think Edey can pick up that slack necessarily offensively. I think a lot of people are penciling him in for being like, oh yeah, third scorer. He's a long way from being a third scorer. I mean, last year he was something like 15 points per 36 minutes. That's like Nick Richards territory. That's less than Brandon Clark scores. So I see an on-paper fit where you dream about maybe a higher upside ceiling if Jalen Wells takes a step forward, if Cedric Coward can fulfill his potential, and if Ja Morant can turn it back to 2022, 2023 Ja, then you have a very, very good team in the West, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And of course, there's a lot to talk about with this Grizzlies roster and the work that remains to be done. But the big takeaway is this was an aggressive move. I think it was partially an aggressive move they made because they don't necessarily want to take a step back after the Desmond Bane trade. They are trying to compete. They just specifically continue to try to compete, in my mind, with draft picks. And of course, they did trade for Marcus Smart. They used assets there, 2 first-round picks. But that trade didn't work out for them. And now we're once again back to, all right, let's use these picks on getting Cedric Coward, getting a guy higher up in the lottery, getting into the lottery when we were outside of it, and then maybe seeing how it goes. I think the big question, which we're not going to know for a while, is how much more work remains to be done. Zach Kleiman was asked that in his media availability after the first round and didn't really give us much of an answer. Like, is this going to be the team? Like right now under contract, might as well go through it this second. right now under contract. We have 13 players. That's including Coward. You got Ja and Jaren, and then Jalen Wells, Zach Edey, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Scottie Pippen Jr., Vince Williams Jr., Cole Anthony, Brandon Clark, John Conchar still here, Gigi Jackson, Jay Huff, and Cedric Coward. That's 13 players. Santi Aldama, restricted free agent. I mean, that would be your 14th player. And then who knows about Cam Spencer? There was a time we thought they were probably going to give him a standard contract, but who knows? And then, of course, there's the second round picks. Those guys with the 46th pick, they drafted Javon Small. Excuse me, the 48th pick was Javon Small, a undersized guard from West Virginia. All Grizzlies fans will immediately be reminded of Javon Carter, another West Virginia product. Small, a four-year college player. So he's a bit older. He's 6'1" without shoes. Chris Harrington has reported that he's expected to get a two-way contract with the Grizzlies, so he will not be on the regular main roster. So right now it looks like we have Javon Small and Zion Pullen on two ways. Of course, they could always get off that Zion Pullen two-way. Not a big deal to drop guys on two-way contracts and add another one. Interestingly, at least interesting to me, ESPN, The Athletic, and Yahoo Sports all had Small going to the Grizzlies in their mock drafts. So good job there, everyone involved. With their second round pick, they took University of Tennessee product Jahmai Mashack, a 4-year player, a defensive specialist with a limited offensive game. And again, you guys are going to know way more than me about these players. So they get a defensive project. Again, a little bit older, 4-year college player. Chris Harrington's reporting he is not necessarily going to get a two-way. He's going to play summer league, be around, compete for a roster spot in training camp or for a two-way spot. Maybe we see him on the hustle this year and they just keep his draft right. So that means in the draft, they got Coward, who maybe projects one day to be a starting 3 or a starting 2 alongside Jalen Wells. And then they get a small guard to go on a two-way. They get a smaller defensive player. And notably to me, they don't get a big man. I still think when we look at the roster and we wonder how much more work there is to be done, you got to say we still probably need a big man. Because even if you pencil in, let's say we're keeping Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, let's imagine they don't make another trade. They don't trade for anybody else. They keep roughly the same team. Let's say Ja and Jalen and KCP starts, or you could say, hey, let's go ahead and say Cedric Coward starts, KCP off the bench. All right, that seems presumptuous, but let's just say your 2 and 3 minutes, they're basically going to be absorbed by Jalen Wells, Cedric Coward, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Vince Williams Jr. And then your front court, Jaren Jackson Jr., of course, Zach Edey, who's injured, Brandon Clark, who's injured, then Santi Aldama's a free agent, Jay Huff is still here. All of that screams you got to have more in the front court. You have to start the season, in my mind. Even if you bring back Santi Aldama, I feel like you need to start the season with a little more depth in that front court. And then, of course, you get to, what is Scottie Pippen's role if Cole Anthony is still here? I think we're guessing Cole Anthony probably going to be used to reshape the roster in a trade, possibly, but that remains to be seen. Now, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back, and I'm going to run through the Summer League schedule and do a quick recap of Zach Kleiman trading up in the first round. Also go over what's next for the Grizzlies roster. All right, so of course the Grizzlies traded up from 16 to 11 to get their guy in Cedric Coward. This, of course, is just par for the course for Zach Kleiman, who loves himself a trade-up. The Zach Kleiman trade-ups, I think it all started with Brandon Clark. They used a future second-round pick to go from 23 to 21 and grab Brandon Clark. After that, they traded up in one of the best trades ever. They used 2 future second-round picks to move into the 30th pick and get Desmond Bane. The Celtics were cutting money. They were cutting payroll. They'd already drafted Peyton Pritchard, so the Grizzlies pull off a heist, get Desmond Bane. Remember, kids, a first-round pick can be anything. Cedric Coward could be anything. Even, if we're lucky, Desmond Bane. But Desmond Bane with a super long wingspan. The Grizzlies trade up for Xavier Tillman. They used a future second-round pick to move up 5 spots in the 2020 draft from 40 to 35 and get Xavier Tillman. They traded up for Zaire Williams. This was a little bit murkier because it was the Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas swap. The Grizzlies also got a pick coming back from the Pelicans to take on Eric Bledsoe's money. So they went from 17 to 10 and get Zaire Williams. Unfortunately, 17 was Trey Murphy. Whoops. And that future first-round pick they got was owned by the Lakers, and it actually never conveyed, although it did turn into Vince Williams Jr., drafted in the second round. In 2021, the Grizzlies traded up for Santi Aldama. They traded the 40th pick and 2 future seconds to go up 10 spots and take Santi. This move shocked people because no one had ever heard of Santi Aldama, it seemed like. Then the Grizzlies traded up for Jake LaRavia. In the triple down on youth summer, the Grizzlies packaged their 22nd and 29th pick to move up to 19, perhaps a reach on Jake LaRavia. But again, Jake LaRavia is still in the NBA. Unfortunately, not on the Grizzlies, but the Grizzlies traded up for Jake LaRavia in the same draft. Not really a trade up, but they traded into the first round. Again, they traded away my guy DeAnthony Melton to draft David Roddy with the 23rd pick. Also, arguably at the time, people called that a reach, taking David Roddy with the 23rd pick. They even traded up to get Kennedy Chandler. That's right. They weren't done trading up in the 2022 draft. They traded a future second-round pick in cash to get this pick from the Spurs. Fun fact, the Grizzlies were still paying Kennedy Chandler last season. They, of course, had to waive him at the end of his rookie year to give Kenneth Lofton Jr. a standard contract as they went into the playoffs because, of course, Steven Adams and Brandon Clark were hurt. Of course, the 2023 draft, they sent their first-round pick for, or as part of the Marcus Smart deal. The 2024 draft, they stood pat, drafted Zach Edey at 9. Reminder, that also was thought of as a reach that was on the higher end of where Zach Edey was projected to go. Zach Edey, of course, put in a very nice rookie season, made all-rookie first team. And now in the 2025 draft, the Grizzlies trade up to get their guy, Cedric Coward. So say what you will about Zach Kleiman. When he has his eyes on the target, he goes and gets the target. Although sometimes rumors emerge after the fact that the guy he traded up for wasn't the guy he was trying to get. This is like the Zaire Williams thing. The accepted retrospective history now is that isn't the guy they were hoping to get at 10. But anyways, Cedric Coward, like I said, shoulder injury, probably not going to play Summer League, or actually it's up in the air. I don't actually know right now. Maybe we'll find out more in the next couple of days. Also, we might find out just more stuff from Zach Kleiman on Friday, June 27th. They're doing another press conference with with Cedric Coward and also with Javon Small. Tomas Isolo is going to be part of that press conference, so we'll get some information about that later on Friday night. As far as the Summer League schedule that we have, of course, the Grizzlies are playing in the Utah Summer League. That schedule is not out, as far as I can tell, as of 1 o'clock Central Time on Friday, June 27th. But the Vegas Summer League schedule came out. Their first game in Vegas is going to be Friday, July 11th, the first game of the day, 1 p.m. local time, 3 p.m. Central. They play the Celtics. Then they play the next day, unfortunately, a back-to-back, which means if you go out to Vegas Summer League, they're probably going to rest guys in either one of those back-to-back games. They play at 7:30 Pacific time against the Trailblazers. Then on Tuesday, July 15th, we have a game against the Warriors. And then Thursday, July 17th, a game against the Hawks. And then they'll enter whatever tournament occurs after that. So that will be a fun time to get a new look. At the very least, we're going to see, I guess, a lot of Javon Small. I assume he's going to be heavily involved in the Grizzlies Summer League team. And now, again, the draft's over. The what next, I think, for the Grizzlies, and maybe the thing that's most interesting to me is what are they going to do about Jaren's contract? Because by moving up in the draft, they actually added to their payroll for next year, meaning they once again slightly decreased the amount of cap space available. We all think they're trying to work out this renegotiation and extension with Jaren, so they need to shed money. I don't know how you do it. The most clear-cut way is just dumping John Konchar's money to a team that gives you no money back, and I don't really see exactly how that would happen. Another way would be to trade Cole Anthony or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, trade away one of those guys, and bring back a player making $6 or $7 million less. That would get you there. A more drastic way could be waiving and stretching Cole Anthony's contract. Please don't do that. Another way could be if Santi Aldama moves on. If the Grizzlies work out a sign and trade with Santi Aldama and send Santi Aldama somewhere else, that would open up the requisite cap space. Maybe that's a potential option. I don't know, but that all needs to happen. Basically, that needs to happen first because the Grizzlies have to maintain that cap space before doing anything else. Like, once let's assume they get an extension, a renegotiating and extension done, you have to have cap space to do the renegotiation. Once you use up the cap space on the renegotiation, then the Grizzlies can sign somebody with the room exception. Then the Grizzlies can trade players and bring back more salary, which is something I hope they do. So that's going to be the thing that allows them then to make the, I think, necessary roster moves they need to make. I mean, I still would like to have a proven bigger wing. I mean, I know Coward has this awesome wingspan, but rookie, and still want more bigger players. I want all kinds of big players, and I still think they need front court help, especially with Zach Edey's injury, with Brandon Clark's returning from injury. You got to have something else in the front court to start the year. And with that, I think we're done. Oh, actually, there's one more quote I thought was interesting. This is from Zach Kleiman's media availability after the first round. He was asked, because this is the first time he had done a public press conference. This is the first time he's done one since Isolo was named head coach, where the interim tag was removed. And he was asked if the Grizzlies interviewed any other candidates. And he said no. They were impressed enough by what Isolo had done with the team in his time as interim head coach. That was good enough for them. So I thought that was notable. Thought that was interesting. Anyways, that is now all for today. If you want more from me, if you want to join the listener Slack, I have been active in the listener Slack even while on vacation. So if you want to join that, you're going to get some extra bonus content. You can get all that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. A huge thank you to everyone who supports me over there. Anyways, hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.